Georgia's Okefenokee Swamp contains a unique combination of environmental factors that create natural corpse preservatives, unlike any other wetland system in North America. The swamp's distinctive black water results from tannic acid concentrations 25–30 times higher than typical freshwater bodies, creating a pH between 3.5 and 4.2. Hydrology researchers have documented how this acidity, combined with consistently low temperatures below the thermocline and minimal dissolved oxygen, effectively pickles organic tissue. When bodies sink into the peat substrate, phenolic compounds bind to proteins, preventing bacterial decomposition through a process chemically similar to leather tanning. What makes the Okefenokee particularly macabre is its cyclical release of these preserved remains. During periods of extreme drought or water table fluctuations, methane produced by partial decomposition forms gas pockets within preserved tissue. As water levels change, these gases expand, eventually providing sufficient buoyancy to float remains back to the surface, often decades after submersion. Forensic taphonomists have documented cases where remains emerge with skin intact but tanned to a leather-like consistency. Russia's remote Valley of Geysers in Kamchatka produces one of Earth's most psychologically disturbing natural sounds. When specific geothermal conditions align, typically preceding major eruptions, the valley's largest geysers emit complex low-frequency acoustic patterns between 7 to 12 Hz, directly corresponding to theta wave frequencies in the human brain associated with deep fear responses. Acoustic engineers have recorded these infrasonic emissions reaching 110 decibels at the source, powerful enough to create resonance in human chest cavities from up to 500 meters away. Neurological studies on site workers show these frequencies trigger immediate release of stress hormones cortisol and adrenaline, despite being at the lower threshold of human hearing. The indigenous Evan people named this phenomenon Heptandikani, or whispering breath, believing it signaled imminent geological catastrophe. Modern seismological research confirms these sounds indeed precede heightened volcanic activity, as they result from resonant vibrations in magma chambers as pressure builds. Wildlife biologists have documented mass evacuations of mammals from the valley 4–6 hours before these sounds become audible to humans. The 1984 Union Carbide disaster in Bhopal, India created an environmental phenomenon never before documented: toxic precipitation with distinctive tissue-degrading properties. When 40 tons of methyl isocyanate gas escaped and mixed with atmospheric moisture, it formed methyl carbamate compounds that returned as rainfall across an 18-square-kilometer area. Toxicological analysis revealed this acid rain had pH levels between 2–3, but more alarmingly contained active isocyanate derivatives that continued chemical reactions upon skin contact. Medical researchers documented how this precipitation penetrated epidermis layers within minutes, converting skin proteins to N-methylcarbamates through nucleophilic addition reactions. The resulting lesions exhibited distinctive characteristics: sharply demarcated boundaries, progressive deepening, and resistance to conventional burn treatment. Most disturbing is the documented long-term effect. Survivors exposed to this rain develop unique scar tissue containing methylated collagen that undergoes partial reactivation during seasonal monsoons, when high humidity and barometric pressure changes trigger degradation of sequestered chemical compounds. The monolithic Moai statues of Easter Island exhibit a hydrological phenomenon that has reinforced local spiritual beliefs for centuries. Carved from Rano Raraku tuff, a compressed volcanic ash with 14.18% porosity, these massive stone figures absorb rainfall through microscopic channels, but release it selectively through mineralized veins of manganese and iron oxides. Geological analysis reveals these impurities create preferential flow paths that frequently terminate near the statue's eye orbits and cheek contours. During intense precipitation events, particularly after prolonged dry periods, the saturated interior releases water that streams down the Moai's faces in patterns indistinguishable from tears. Spectroscopic examination shows the liquid often contains elevated levels of dissolved minerals that leave salt-like residue tracks, enhancing the weeping appearance. The Rapa Nui people's oral traditions describe these tears as pure Vayanga, spiritual water carrying ancestral sorrow. For the island's ecological collapse, modern conservation efforts have documented how environmental pollutants have altered the pH of rainfall, accelerating mineral dissolution within the stone, and paradoxically, increasing the crying phenomenon. Canada's Bay of Fundy generates the world's most dangerous tidal system, creating what hydrologists term hydraulic acceleration zones that have claimed hundreds of lives. The bay's unique funnel shape and resonant period amplify Atlantic tides to extraordinary heights, up to 16 meters, with a flow rate exceeding 160 billion tons of water twice daily. Most lethal are the bay's tidal bores, walls of water advancing at speeds up to 15 kilometers per hour across seemingly dry mudflats. These create what rescuers call progressive entrapment zones, where solid ground transforms to quicksand-like consistency within minutes. Sediment analysis reveals a precise clay-to-sand ratio that creates thixotropic properties, appearing solid until disturbed, then liquefying instantly under pressure. Victims caught in advancing tides experience rapid submersion as water transforms the substrate beneath them. Search and recovery documents from Nova Scotia Emergency Services reveal distinctive post-mortem characteristics. Bodies recovered show uniform sediment infiltration in all body cavities, and typically present entangled in distinctive spiral patterns of seaweed, primarily Ascophyllum. Japan's infamous Aokigahara Forest, known globally as a suicide destination, harbors a bioluminescent phenomenon that has aided recovery teams in locating victims. The dense volcanic soil beneath the forest contains unusually high concentrations of mycorrhizal fungi, particularly Armillaria malleus and Amphilotus oleracus, which exhibit specialized saprophytic behavior when colonizing human remains. Unlike typical decomposition patterns, these fungi produce extraordinarily intense bioluminescence when metabolizing human neural tissue, particularly the phospholipid-rich myelin sheaths of nerve cells. Biochemical analysis reveals the luminescence results from an enzymatic oxidation of luciferin compounds enhanced by trace elements concentrated in human nervous tissue. Japanese forestry officials have documented light emissions visible from 50 meters in complete darkness, with wavelength peaks at 520 nm producing an ethereal green glow distinctly different from typical foxfire. The phenomenon intensifies approximately 8 to 12 days post-mortem, coinciding with neural tissue decomposition, and can persist for up to 3 weeks depending on environmental conditions. New Zealand's Waitomo cave system features a geological anomaly found nowhere else on Earth. Weeping walls that exude a viscous crimson fluid with remarkable similarities to human blood. Geological analysis reveals these formations occur where iron-rich groundwater encounters unique bacterial colonies of Metallogenium and Leptotheric species that catalyze oxidation processes. The resulting liquid has a viscosity of 3.5 centipoise, nearly identical to human blood, and contains suspended hematite particles that maintain colloidal distribution just as hemoglobin does in plasma. Spectrophotometric analysis shows the liquid absorbs light at 540 TM, precisely matching blood's peak absorption. Maori oral histories describe these caves as Te Ana Waitoto, or the tunnels of bloodwater, fitted with an ancient battle where warriors sought refuge but were trapped by rising waters. Speleologists have documented how the cave's microclimate maintains constant 98% humidity and 15 DGC temperature, conditions that preserve the iron in its liquid state rather than oxidizing to rust. Most unsettling is the cave's seasonal pulse during autumn rains. Hydrostatic pressure increases calcium and iron dissolution rates. The Gobi Desert harbors a deadly atmospheric phenomenon that has killed nomadic herders for centuries. During spring and early summer, specific regions of the southern Gobi generate dust storms containing exceptionally high concentrations of crystalline silica, microscopic quartz particles with jagged, fractal-like edges measuring less than 3 microns. These particles are small enough to bypass upper respiratory defenses, but large enough to become permanently embedded in lung tissue. Atmospheric scientists have measured concentrations exceeding 800 micrograms per cubic meter during peak storms, 16 times higher than safety thresholds. What makes this dust uniquely dangerous is how the particle's crystalline structure creates microscopic lacerations in alveolar tissue, triggering aggressive fibrosis that can develop fully within weeks rather than the years typical of industrial silica. Archaeological examination of naturally mummified remains from the region reveals distinctive lung pathology, with characteristic nodular scarring and microscopic silica deposits visible under polarized light microscopy. Mongolian traditional medicine describes karu ushig, or black lung sickness, dating back to the 13th century. In specific regions of the Amazon rainforest, particularly along the borders of Peru and Brazil, strangler fig species have evolved a macabre ecological niche as necrophagic flora, plants that incorporate animal and human remains into their structure. These aggressive hemipiphytes begin life in forest canopies, sending aerial roots downward that eventually envelop host trees. Botanical research has documented how these same roots can encase corpses on the forest floor, with specialized chemoreceptors detecting decomposition compounds that trigger accelerated growth toward protein-rich organic matter. Indigenous Mats people have traditionally used these trees for sky burials, placing deceased tribal members against young strangler figs that gradually absorb the bodies over 5-8 years. Dendrochronological studies revealed distinct growth rings in these death trees corresponding to decomposition stages, with calcium-rich layers marking where bones were incorporated. Biologists have identified unique alkaloid compounds in the tree's sap that repel necrophagous insects, allowing the fig to monopolize nutrient absorption from the corpse. CT imaging of mature specimens has revealed completely intact human skulls. England's iconic White Cliffs of Dover produce one of the world's most unsettling natural acoustic phenomena during specific storm conditions. The combination of the cliff's geological composition, 94% calcium carbonate with regular flint nodules, and their distinctive erosion patterns creates what acousticians term resonant cavities. When southwesterly gales exceeding 50 knots strike these cavities at precise angles, the compressed air produces harmonic overtones in the human vocal range between 2,530 Hz. Frequencies our brains are evolutionarily primed to recognize as screams. Maritime historians have uncovered accounts from as early as 1338 describing how sailors dreaded the wailing souls of Dover during winter storms. The phenomenon intensifies near sections where ancient smugglers' tunnels honeycomb the chalk, creating complex internal chambers that amplify and modulate the sounds. Audio recordings analyzed by Bristol University's Acoustic Engineering Department revealed that the whales contain frequency modulations remarkably similar to human distress calls, explaining why they trigger automatic psychological distress in listeners. The sounds reach peak intensity during the scourging storms of February and November. Mount Nyiragongo in the Democratic Republic of Congo harbors the world's largest and most active lava lake, generating a deadly environmental hazard unmatched elsewhere on Earth. When the lake's 900 ddC molten rock interacts with rainwater or groundwater seepage, it creates superheated acidic mist containing sulfuric, hydrochloric, and hydrofluoric acids at concentrations up to 1,000 times more acidic than lemon juice. Volcanologists monitoring the crater have documented this aerosol cloud reaching pH levels of 0.5, capable of causing chemical burns to exposed skin within seconds. Unlike ordinary volcanic gases, this mist clings to low elevations due to its density, flowing down slopes and collecting in depressions where it can remain concentrated for hours. Field researchers wearing specialized equipment have recovered remains of birds, insects, and small mammals caught in these invisible death clouds, finding bones stripped of tissue and organs liquefied by the powerful acids. The 2002 eruption released unprecedented volumes of this corrosive mist, with medical facilities in Goma reporting 47 cases of severe respiratory and skin damage among residents who encountered peripheral fringes of the cloud. When the atomic bomb detonated over Hiroshima at 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945, it created a flash of thermal radiation so intense, approximately 7,000 dCc, that it permanently altered exposed surfaces through a photochemical reaction, similar to extreme sunburn. Wherever objects or people blocked this radiation, they created nuclear shadows, negative images preserved on stone, concrete, and metal surfaces. Scientific analysis reveals these aren't mere scorch marks, but permanent molecular changes to the material's composition. At the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum, researchers have documented 56 distinct human shadow impressions, the most famous being the shadow of a person on the Yorizuya Bridge steps, showing a person sitting waiting for the bank to open, and the human shadow etched in stone at the Hiroshima City Museum. Spectrographic analysis shows that the shadows formed in milliseconds as victims were simultaneously vaporized. What makes these shadows particularly haunting is their precision, preserving details like shirt buttons and hair outlines and their permanence. Despite decades of weathering, rain, and restoration efforts, many shadows remain clearly visible today. Yellowstone National Park's hydrothermal features harbor a macabre secret, documented by geologists but rarely mentioned in tourist brochures. Select geysers and hot springs within the park, particularly those in the Norris Geyser Basin, periodically those in the Norris Geyser Basin sentries, and transportation paths. These remains, typically from bison, elk, and smaller mammals that fall into thermal features, become trapped in underground chambers where temperatures exceeding 200 DGF and highly acidic water, pH 2-3, strip tissue within hours. The bones then undergo a unique mineralization process as silica-rich water deposits opaline layers, effectively creating fossilized remains in mere weeks rather than millennia. During pressure buildups preceding eruptions, these lightweight hollow-core bones get propelled upward through geyser channels. Analysis of recovered specimens reveals distinct chemical signatures from different thermal pools, allowing researchers to track animal movement patterns posthumously. Historical records from the Washburn expedition of 1870 document how early explorers discovered human-sized femurs and rib fragments, triggering fears of cannibalistic practices among indigenous tribes. Bolivia's Salar de Uyuni, the world's largest salt flat, conceals a geological phenomenon that has terrified travelers for centuries. Beneath its pristine white crust lies a complex system of brine pools and gas pockets containing primarily methane and hydrogen sulfide. During seasonal temperature fluctuations, especially at dawn when surface temperatures rise rapidly, these gases expand and escape through microscopic fissures in the salt crust. Geologists have recorded these releases producing hissing sounds measuring up to 75 decibels, comparable to a loud vacuum cleaner. Spectrographic analysis reveals the sounds contain infrasonic components below human hearing that nonetheless trigger primitive fear responses in the brain. The indigenous Aymara people developed elaborate rituals to appease what they called Jupaj Samai, or breath of the ancestors, believing these sounds represented the final exhalations of those who perished crossing the treacherous salt desert. Chemical analysis of the escaping gases shows high concentrations of organic compounds, lending scientific credence to the belief that decomposing organic matter from ancient deaths contributes to the phenomenon. During Taal volcano's catastrophic January 2020 eruption in the Philippines, it unleashed a particularly insidious form of volcanic material, microscopic glass, sharp ash particles with distinctive hook-like structures. Volcanologists from the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology documented how these particles, measuring between 2 and 10 microns, were small enough to permanently lodge in lung tissue. The ash's unique composition included high concentrations of crystalline silica and sulfur compounds that, when moistened by lung tissue, formed a cement-like substance. Medical reports from Batangas Regional Hospital recorded 247 cases of patients producing black tar-like mucus that contained solidified ash aggregates. Respiratory specialists identified a condition they termed tall lung, characterized by progressive scarring similar to silicosis but developing within weeks rather than decades. CT scans revealed distinctive branch-like patterns in the lungs of survivors, where the ash had created permanent casts of bronchial passages. On Yemen's isolated Socotra archipelago, the otherworldly dragon blood trees, Dracaena cinnabari, have evolved one of nature's most alarming defense mechanisms. When their bark is punctured, these ancient umbrella-shaped trees immediately exude a thick crimson resin so similar to human blood that early chemical analysis revealed it contains benzene rings nearly identical to hemoglobin compounds. This resin rapidly oxidizes upon exposure to air, darkening just like drying blood. Botanical research shows that trees contain specialized resin canals under extraordinary pressure, up to 40 psi, causing dramatic spurting when damaged. Ancient Socotrans believed these trees housed the souls of warriors who fell in battle against Persian invaders around 1000 CE. Medical ethnography records show the resin was historically collected to treat dysentery, wounds, and fractures, as it contains compounds with antimicrobial properties. Carbon dating of some specimens indicates these trees can live over 650 years, with the oldest trees potentially witnessing multiple historical invasions of the island. Namibia's notorious Skeleton Coast earned its grim name through a unique combination of deadly oceanic conditions found nowhere else on Earth. The cold Benguela Current collides with warm desert air to create dense fog banks and treacherous shoals that have claimed over 1,000 vassals. What makes this coastline particularly macabre is the water's composition, a mixture of high salinity, unique algal microorganisms, and exceptionally abrasive sand particles suspended in constant turbulence. Oceanographers have documented how this combination can strip human tissue from bone in as little as 72 hours. The skeletal remains often wash ashore with a distinctive, polished appearance. As the sand-laden water effectively sandblasts the bones, maritime researchers have recovered sailor remains dating back to 15th century Portuguese expeditions, identifiable only by nearby wreckage. The coast's unique preservative properties create a natural ossuary where human bones intermingle with whale and seal skeletons, creating beaches literally paved with bones. Some still wearing the metal rings, bracelets, or dog tags that once adorned living tissue. The ancient city of Ani, once the magnificent capital of medieval Armenia, now stands abandoned on Turkey's eastern border. Its crumbling cathedral, churches, and mosques create a natural acoustic phenomenon that has terrified visitors for centuries. When wind passes through the precisely arranged apertures, cracks, and chambers of these stone structures, it produces haunting whispers and moans that echo across the plateau. Archaeological studies reveal that these sounds occur primarily at dawn and dusk when temperature differentials create specific air currents. The whispers are most pronounced in the Cathedral of Ani, where architectural features unintentionally form wind instruments within the walls. Local folklore attributes these sounds to the spirits of thousands slaughtered during the Seljuk Turkish invasion in 1064, when the city's population was massacred after a 25-day. Acoustic engineers have documented these sounds reaching 30 decibels, loud enough to be clearly distinguished from ambient noise, explaining why, for centuries, shepherds refused to graze their flocks near the ruins after sunset.